High Speed 2 is a planned high-speed railway in the United Kingdom linking London, Birmingham, the East Midlands, Leeds, Sheffield and Manchester. It would be the second high-speed rail line in Britain, after High Speed 1, which connects London to the Channel Tunnel. The line is to be built in a Y configuration, with London on the bottom of the Y, Birmingham at the centre, Leeds at the top right and Manchester at the top left. Work on the first phase is scheduled to begin in 2017, reaching Birmingham by 2026, Crewe on the left leg of the Y by 2027, and fully completed by 2033. Carlisle, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Liverpool, Newcastle, Preston and York will be linked to the network by HS2 trains running over existing slower tracks or edge-of-town HS2 stations. Although Parliament has approved the first two phases of construction, precise details of the plan and route have not been formalised, and are still open to negotiation and change. For example, the spur to Heathrow Airport was dropped from phases 1 and 2 in 2015, as was the HS1 to HS2 link, while the Crewe hub has been added to the scheme. Transport for the North proposed a west to east 4-track Trans-Pennine Railway line, HS3, that would link with the HS2 line to London, and a new Liverpool-Manchester Airport Manchester Railway line also linked to HS2. In March 2016, the National Infrastructure Commission's report, High Speed North, recommended collaboration between TfN and HS2 Limited on the design of the northern parts of HS2. Some redesigning would be needed of HS2 to link into HS3. The HS3 rail link was given the go-ahead in the March 2016 budget. The Institute of Public Policy Research on 8 August 2016 urged the government to prioritise HS3 over HS2. The HS2 project is being developed by High Speed 2 Limited, a company limited by guarantee established by the UK government. History. High-speed rail has been expanding across the European Union since the 1980s, with several member countries, notably France, Spain and Germany, investing heavily in new lines capable of operating at over 270 km per hour. In 2009, there were reportedly 5,600 km of high-speed line in operation in Europe. A further 3,480 km were under construction and another 8,500 km were planned. High-speed rail arrived in the United Kingdom with the opening in 2003 of the first part of High Speed 1 Channel Tunnel rail link between London and the Channel Tunnel. The development of a second high-speed line was proposed in 2009 by the United Kingdom government to address capacity constraints on the West Coast Main Line Railway, which is forecast to be at full capacity in 2025. Most of the rail network in Britain consists of lines constructed during the Victorian era, which are limited to speeds no greater than 200 km per hour. A document published by the Department for Transport in January 2009 described an increase of 50% in rail passenger traffic and an increase of 40% in freight in the preceding 10 years in the UK, and detailed several infrastructure problems. The report proposed that new high-speed lines be constructed to address these issues and, following assessment of various options, concluded that the most appropriate initial route for a new line was from London to the West Midlands. High Speed 2 Limited. In January 2009, the Labour government established High Speed 2 Limited, chaired by Sir David Rowlands, to examine the case for a new high-speed line and present a potential route between London and the West Midlands. The government report suggested that the line could be extended to reach Scotland, drawing on consultations carried out for the Department for Transport and Network Rail. HS2 Limited would provide advanced advice on options for a Heathrow International Interchange station, access to central London, connectivity with HS1 and the existing rail network, and financing and construction, and report to the government on the first stage by the end of 2009. In August 2009, Network Rail published its own study independent of HS2's work, outlining somewhat different proposals for the expansion of the railway network, which included a new high-speed rail line between London and Glasgow, Edinburgh, following a route through the West Midlands and the northwest of England. For the HS2 report, a route was investigated to an accuracy of 50 centimetres. In December 2009, HS2 presented its report to the government. The study investigated the possibility of links to Heathrow Airport and connections with Crossrail, the Great Western Main Line, and the Channel Tunnel rail link, as displayed in the map shown. On the 11th of March 2010, the HS2 report and supporting studies were published together with the government's command paper on high-speed rail. Conservative Liberal Democrat Coalition Government Review. The Conservative Liberal Democrat Coalition, on taking office in May 2010, undertook a review of HS2 plans inherited from the previous government. The Conservative Party in opposition had backed the idea of a high-speed terminus at St Pancras with a direct link to Heathrow Airport and had adopted a policy to connect London, Manchester, Leeds and Birmingham with Heathrow by high-speed rail, with construction starting in 2015. In March 2010, Theresa Villiers had stated the idea that some kind of Wormwood Scrubs International Station is the best rail solution for Heathrow is just not credible. The new Secretary of State for Transport, Philip Hammond, asked Lord Mairwinnie, a former Conservative Transport Secretary, to conduct an urgent review of the proposed route. The coalition government wished the high-speed line to be routed via Heathrow Airport, an idea rejected by HS2 Limited. Mairwinnie's conclusions contradicted Villiers' view and Conservative policy in opposition, stating that HS2 should not go to Heathrow Airport until it reaches northern England. Routing the whole line via Heathrow would add 7 minutes to the journey time of all services. In December 2008, an article in The Economist noted the increasing political popularity of high-speed rail in Britain as a solution to transport congestion, and as an alternative to unpopular schemes such as road tolls and runway expansion, but concluded that its future would depend on it being commercially viable. In November 2010, Philip Hammond stated that government support for HS2 did not require it to break even directly, what The Economist had called the financial viability test for new rail infrastructure. If we used financial accounting, we would never have any public spending. We would build nothing. Financial accounting would strike a dagger through the whole case for public sector investment. Public consultation. On the 20th of December 2010, the government published a slightly revised line of route for public consultation, based on a Y-shaped route from London to Birmingham with branches to Leeds and Manchester, as originally put forward by Lord Adonis as Secretary of State for Transport under the previous Labour government, with alterations designed to minimise the visual, noise, and other environmental impacts of the line. In a statement to Parliament, the Secretary of State confirmed that the first phase of construction would include a high-speed line from London to Birmingham as well as a connection to High-Speed 1. High-speed lines north of the West Midlands would be built in later stages, and a link to Heathrow Airport would be initially provided by a connection at Old Oak Common, with a high-speed link to the airport to be added later. The high-speed high-speed line would connect to the existing network, allowing through trains from London to northern destinations. The consultation documents were published on the 11th of February 2011, with the consultation period set to run until July 2011. When the results were published, they revealed that over 90% of respondents to the consultation were against HS2. In January 2012, the Secretary of State for Transport announced that HS2 would go ahead. It would comprise a Y-shaped network with stations at London, Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, Sheffield and the East Midlands, conveying up to 26,000 people each hour at speeds of up to 400 km/h. It would be built in two stages. Phase 1 would be a 225 km route from London to the West Midlands, which would be constructed by 2026. Phase 2, from Birmingham to both Leeds and Manchester, would be constructed by 2033. Consultation on this phase would begin in early 2014, with a final route chosen by the end of 2014. Additional tunneling and other measures to meet local communities and environmental concerns were also announced. The legislative process would be achieved through two hybrid bills, one for each phase. Hybrid bill. To implement the HS2 proposals, the government will introduce on behalf of HS2 Limited two hybrid bills, one for each phase, as the railway will impact on private individuals and organisations along the route or elsewhere. Each bill is required to address the environmental impact and how this will be mitigated, and to allow individuals affected to petition Parliament to seek amendments or assurances. The timeline requires for the legislation relating to the construction and operation of Phase 1 to be introduced to Parliament towards the end of 2013 and to pass into law by the spring of 2015. Parliament's second reading of the hybrid bill for Phase 1 took place on the 28th of April 2014 and was approved by 452 votes to 41. The hybrid bill for Phase 2 will be prepared for January 2015. A legal requirement of the hybrid bill is the production and deposition of an environmental impact assessment to identify the significant impacts on the community, property, landscape, visual amenity, biodiversity, surface and groundwater, archaeology, traffic, transport, waste and resources. Proposals to avoid, reduce or remedy significant adverse impacts through mitigation measures are also required. HS2 Limited announced its intention to consult on the scope and methodology of the EIA in April 2012, and based on this will publish a draft environmental statement on which it intends to consult with national bodies and local authorities and community forums along the route, in the spring of 2013. On the 23rd of March 2016, the House of Commons passed the HS2 hybrid bill at its third reading. The bill is currently progressing through the House of Lords and is expected to gain royal assent by the end of 2016, with construction starting in 2017. Preparation Bill. The High-Speed Rail Bill was passed by 350 votes to 34 in the House of Commons on the 31st of October 2013. The bill then faced further scrutiny in the House of Lords. This legislation releases funds to pay for surveys, buy property and compensate evicted residents. On the 21st of November 2013, royal assent was obtained and the bill became law. Legal challenges. At the end of March 2012, the Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust announced that it had submitted a complaint to the European Commission that the UK government, in failing to carry out a strategic environmental assessment ahead of deciding on the route of Phase 1 of HS2, was in breach of European Union legislation. BBOWT said that the complaint would only be considered by the EU Commission after the UK courts had concluded consideration of various judicial reviews submitted to them. In April 2012, 5 requests for judicial review were submitted, 2 by HS2 Action Alliance and 1 each by the 51 Metres Group, Aylesbury Park Golf Club, and Heathrow Hub Limited. In its applications, HS2AA claimed that the government failed to carry out a proper strategic environmental assessment and that it provided inadequate information to the public during the public consultation. As a consequence, the HS2AA claimed that the Secretary of State's decision to approve Phase 1 of HS2 was made without proper justification, that it ignored the government's own processes and assessment criteria, and relied on undisclosed material. In a separate judicial review request, the 51 Metres Group challenged the government on several grounds. Firstly, that it failed to consult properly on the original of the revised route. Secondly, that it failed to consider the impact of HS2 on the London Underground network. Thirdly, that it did not take proper account of the environmental impact on the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty and several important wildlife habitats. And finally, that the hybrid bill approach was incompatible with the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive. Aylesbury Park Golf Club's proceedings are based on the impact of the proposed route, which will pass through a part of the club. Heathrow Hub Limited, a company owned by Arrow, announced it has also started proceedings on the grounds that the UK government could choose an alternative route which would provide an improved connection between HS2 and Crossrail via a transport hub built on land owned by the company. At the end of July 2012, a High Court judge gave permission for the 5 judicial reviews to proceed with individual hearings set for an 8-day period in early December 2012. The judge confirmed that the cases of the HS2AA, 51M and Heathrow Hub, whose consultation responses had been lost by HS2 Limited, could be amended to incorporate this defect in their claims. A further hearing was set for October 2012 for the government to explain its continued refusal to release passenger data relating to the West Coast Main Line. On the 15th of March 2013, Mr. Justice Ousley rejected all but one of the claims. In paragraph 843 of the judgment, he concluded that the consultation process in respect of blight and compensation was all in all so unfair as to be unlawful. Permission to appeal has been granted on 2 grounds: applicability of strategic environmental assessment to the project and reconsultation of optimized alternative. A further rebuff by the Court of Appeal in July 2013 meant the prospect of a showdown at the Supreme Court.